Well, hello, and welcome again to the 2012fad.com. I'll be your host for this evening, and my name is Charlie Bluehawk. Last night we talked about gun control equals violence, and how the only people who want you to be disarmed are the criminals, whether they're the criminals who are politicians, and frankly today there's so many criminals who are nothing but politicians. It's hard to tell them from the guys who were knocking over liquor stores or the mafia or the CIA. I grew up with CIA assets, street thugs, bullies, liars, cowards, U.S. Army Air Corps intelligence operatives, also bullies, liars, cowards, the worst kind of scum imaginable. And these are the ones who want gun control because, like all bullies, they're cowards, and they want to be able to hurt you without any harm to themselves. So they want to be able to break into your house, rob you, rape you, murder you at no danger to themselves. And so the people who really want gun control are the people who want to hurt you. That's it. It's very, really simple. A gun is a tool, and it has its use. In the Constitution, it says that we have the right to bear arms to protect ourselves and our nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And whenever anyone, any newspaper, any radio, any politician, anyone says that gun control is necessary, apply the old saying, I listen to what you say, I watch what you do. And watch them run. And so tonight I thought we might chat about pulling the trigger, talking about gun control. Did you know that in World War II, it took an average of 250,000 bullets to kill one enemy soldier? It was really hard, our masters discovered, to get us to kill each other. In World War II, from the bankers' point of view, it was even worse. It was virtually impossible to get the armies to actually shoot at each other. There are many instances, stories from World War I, where army troops from one side of the battle were marching towards the other side of the battle, and they'd pass their opposite numbers, marching in the other direction. And they just kept going. They didn't pull guns on each other or anything. They just passed each other on the road and just kept on marching in opposite directions. And since it is bankers who start wars, and I know it sounds trite and you think New World Order and conspiracy theories and all this stuff, but you have to remember it's just business. It is the business of hatred. It's the business of Satan worship. And believe it or not, our masters are very religious people. They believe in religion quite vehemently. It is their entire reason for existing. The fact that they actually worship Satan, the devil, doesn't really matter. It actually makes them more religious than you and I. Not only do our masters believe that Satan exists, they believe that God exists. And they're at war with God. They're against God. Doesn't matter if God exists, doesn't matter if Satan exists. Our masters, in this case the bankers, do. And part of black magic ritual demands that innocent life be sacrificed in the most horrific ways possible. And plus, bankers discovered, and the Rothschilds, you may have heard the story of the Rothschild banking interests in Europe, and of course they've spread this disease all over the world. Bankers discovered that by loaning money to both sides in a war, they win both ways. They're loaning money to both the winner and the loser. The winner pays their bills on time. The loser has to make what they call reparations. Whoever loses the war has to pay for it. So the bankers work both sides against the middle. Bankers eventually realized that if they loaned money to kings and queens, You often wonder watching these old Robin Hood movies where the king gets all this money to spend. Well, they collect taxes, but there's Robin Hood stealing the tax money and giving it back to the poor. So what does the king do? The king needs money. Guess where the king got money? From the bankers. Guess what the bankers got in return? Well, they got their money back, of course. But they also got the right to print our money for us. Did you know that today, and it's August 8th, 2011, did you know today that the people of the United States owe $12 trillion to the Federal Reserve Bank? Now, you might think that the Federal Reserve Bank, it sounds quite government-like. It must be a division of the U.S. federal government. It's not. It's owned by bankers, in this case, foreign bankers. And foreign bankers actually charge us to print our money for us. And so today, you and I owe $12 trillion to bankers just because they printed our paper money for us. I don't know about you, but I'd run down to Kinko's and see if they'd give me a better deal. It's interesting how bankers, when they learn that loaning money to both sides in a conflict and then starting the war themselves, they learned the power of the press. For example, there was a very famous battle called the Battle of Waterloo, where I believe it was Lord Nelson was fighting Napoleon. And if Napoleon won, it would have wiped out the British economy. Well, of course, I'm not getting into a tremendous amount of detail here. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, you're a Rothschild, and you want to make some money. Well, let's say you have someone during the Battle of Waterloo spread the rumor that the British lost and that Napoleon won. What would that do to your stock values if the British army lost and the French army was marching on London? That would pretty much crash the British stock market, wouldn't it? Nothing in Britain would have any value because the French were going to occupy it. Let's say you started that rumor as a banker, and you stood there and you waited and watched the price of all the British shares just fall through the floor. Let's say you were standing there with cash in your hands and you started buying all those shares at pennies on the dollar. What would happen, do you suppose, afterwards when you discover that, hey, Britain actually didn't lose the battle? Hey, the French are not coming. Hey, Napoleon met his Waterloo, as they say. Your British stocks would then be worth a fortune, but you paid virtually nothing for them. That would make you very, very powerful. And you could then continue loaning money to kings and queens and prime ministers. In fact, that's how Britain got into World War II. Winston Churchill, who history tells us was a great man, was actually a drunk, a gambler. He was a moron. He was a psychopath. He lost a lot of money gambling. The Rothschilds covered his losses and then ordered him into war against Germany. Well, that worked pretty well, considering that it was other bankers, including the Rothschilds, from New York, who funded Hitler and started the war. World War II, the Nazi Party itself, was actually created in Long Island, New York. It was financed and operated from New York, Wall Street. So pulling the trigger, bankers discovered, was sort of important because they wanted, in war, you need ammunition. Well, ammunition, you need guns to fire it, you need planes to drop bombs. So unless people were killing each other, we weren't making any money. On the other hand, we wanted people to suffer and suffer horribly. So the bankers were torn. They finally realized they had enough money, so now it was time for horror to take the place of simple killing. I remember standing a few years ago in a store called Best Buy's. It was a chain store in Southern California. And I was in a place called Pasadena, which is a suburb of Los Angeles in Southern California. I was looking for a copy, a DVD of Monty Python. I think I was looking for Life of Brian or something. And so I was apparently bored and had nothing better to do with my time, so I was wandering around stores trying to find this DVD. And I remember being in Best Buy's, and these two little boys, maybe 5 years old, I could see them playing a video game, and the look of joy and just happiness and excitement on their faces. When little children are having fun, I got to go see, watch them playing, go and see what the fun is. So I went over across the store, and I stood behind these two little boys, 5 years old. They were playing a video game, and I thought, well, it's Donkey Kong or something. What do I know? And I stood behind them, and I was looking at this game, expecting to see something fun and exciting, that put this joyous look on these little boys' faces. It was a World War II video game featuring men, fully animated, with machine guns. And these machine guns were shooting the enemy. And to say that it was realistic would be an understatement. The amount of blood I saw in a few moments was staggering. And as these little boys were pulling the trigger on these automatic weapons, they were actually shooting enemy soldiers. Blood was flowing very freely, and body parts were flying all over the screen. I thought I was going to vomit right there in the store at the Best Buy's. These two little boys thought this was the best fun in the world. It seems that our masters, money, as we've talked about, is no longer the object for our masters' power is. And to gain power, you need hatred. Guns are useful, but hatred is really effective. So, since it did take 250,000 bullets in World War II to kill one enemy soldier, generals were in the military were very upset by this. They wanted their people to kill instantly or effectively. And so all kinds of programs were instituted to, I suppose the word is disassociate killing from reality. And of course the advent of the video game was just a godsend, in this case a Satan-sent blessing for our masters, because now we could desensitize our children to killing, make it fun. That's why American troops today are so terrible in the field, and why other armies refuse to serve with American troops, because they learn to kill with video games. American troops overseas are the worst troops in the world. They're getting better now that they've learned to kill for real, and what real killing means. It also happens to lead to a very high suicide rate. American troops are killing themselves at a horrifying rate, because killing people in reality is a lot different than killing them on a video screen. But fortunately, our masters have come up with a new solution. It's a very old technique called fly-by-wire. Back in World War II, the U.S. Army Air Corps was actually flying planes remotely for target practice. Today, we have the descendant of something called Global Hawk. It's an unmanned aircraft that carries guns and will deliver bombs anywhere in the world. And guess what? The operators, they sit at home in front of their video game. Now they're back to killing people in video games, but it's real life. And the killers, they're sitting at home with a bottle of popcorn, some Coca-Cola, and a joystick and a monitor. The nice thing about these Global Hawk, these international killing machines, flying machines, they can be remotely controlled anywhere in the world by satellite. The operator sits at home. You can murder people at a wedding in Pakistan. You can butcher children in a school in Iraq. And you can go home at 5 o'clock for dinner with the family. Pulling the trigger has become so easy now. We're accustomed to gang wars where gangs simply go and murder each other in the streets. It's no big deal. I remember my first trip to New Zealand in 2004. I was so excited by the propaganda of how evolved the New Zealand people were, how highly educated, how highly professional they were, and how they were only looking towards a bright future and growth and prosperity. I was so filled with this lie that while I was in the city of Auckland, I overlooked the fact that 7 people in one suburb were murdered in 1 week over drug deals gone bad, something called P. P, I guess they manufacture locally. I guess it's some sort of upper. It's really astonishing how today pulling the trigger doesn't really mean much to you and I. I remember in Riverside, California, Southern California, it's a sort of a desert. Well, all of Southern California is desert, but Riverside is really the desert. I remember how a black girl, maybe 14 years old, had fallen asleep in the front seat of a car and the doors were locked, and she was just sleeping in the front seat, parked. Some Riverside police officers showed up, for whatever reason, demanded that she get out of the car. Well, poor little thing, she was asleep. The police officers pulled their weapons, several of them, and were screaming at her to get out of the car. She didn't know they were there because she was asleep in the front seat. Because she didn't obey them, these police officers, all ex-military, emptied their guns into her body. I can't remember if there were 3 or 4 policemen. But they emptied their guns into her body. 14 years old. Why? Because she was black, she was a girl, she was asleep, and she didn't instantly obey. This is why you never let military people act as policemen. Because police are there to protect and to defend the citizens. The military is there to kill the enemy. And to a military-trained person acting like a cop, everyone is the enemy. An ancient Celtic prayer, a toast, I will share with you. May you live as long as you wish. May you love as long as you live. For the 2012fad.com, this is Charlie Bluehawk. The 2012 Fad is brought to you by Coffee and Blood, Love Letters Between the Dead, a series of 5 erotica horror novels about a fallen angel finding his way back to regain his own soul, and how the CIA war against the human race. Their black magic captures and traps him in the body of a mind-controlled slave designed to hunt down and to kill their god, their Satan.